Welcome, real estate rock stars, to Real Estate RocknRolla. So you want to be a rock and roller? This is where we go on an advanced level and start talking about progressive productivity, cementing your place and turning what is essentially a job, if you like, into a career lifestyle. And we had a bit of a diversion. In some ways, we're still diverting now, sticking with what's currently going on. But we are now scheduled to talk about, in session 6, emancipating your activity. What do I mean by emancipating your activity? By just kind of taking control, understanding where your energy ought to be going, why it should be going there, and what you should be focused upon. It's a funny situation, like it was just yesterday that I was talking to each of the real estate rock stars, and the subject matter came up. We're talking, as we typically do, between them and those that actually have somebody working directly with them in assistance or as an assistant. I'll give some clarity to that, hopefully today as we go along. And we were just talking about, continuity and the way you should be thinking and where your priorities need to be. So you remember we did those 4 tests where I just went through and said, what tasks do you absolutely love? And we had at the top of the list, we had listing presentations, negotiating deals pretty much, and that sort of kind of rounds it out. Then what tasks do you do under sufferance? Well, they were typically things like, marketing, manning open homes, all the way through to writing ads, that type of thing. And then those tasks that you would rather stick pins in your eyes than do. I mean, these are the ones that immediately we think about if we're going to get an assistant, how we ferry those off to them. And I don't for a second say that you shouldn't be looking at doing that. But what I do say is that there ought to still be done with some sort of prioritization and making sure that any task that you are upholding is directly linked to a result, to productivity. So the case in point that I was talking about yesterday is, let's look at open for inspections. So often we think when we win a listing, we move that listing into the space of coming onto the market, and we're heading for the first open for inspection, and we're looking at getting activity in and around that. And if we're to be honest, if I really drill down with a lot of professionals, they start talking about the desire to get it sold, to get the buyer at the right price, move it on, and then move on. And of course, in that context, and I know that I talk about this on the sales trainer level, but in that context, they're then talking about, well, once we get a result, from that result, we can then leverage into the next listing. Well, I caution you around this, and you need to understand about emancipating your activity and looking at what's important here. When you win a listing, you now have the opportunity for leverage that becomes a seed that can grow into 2, 3, or 4 listings. And, if you're at the real estate rockstar level and you've already got market share, which I can assure you most of you are at best, I think I've got someone working probably at around 40% of their capacity. So you want to be at 70% of your capacity before you're leaning back on this. So in fact, you'd be focusing on traction and building market share at any one time. And each time you have a seed, you've got to think, how do I immediately identify that next seller? Then how do I communicate with them centric to the motive and capture their imagination? Then how do I give them advice rather than price? How do I now push in so that I'm first cab off the rank that is considered once they get inside that presentation phase? And then ideally, how do I get it listed? And everything that you do has to be, in my opinion, totally contrasted to what the competition might be doing. So you are a standout, and it has to be done not just for the sake of being different, but different in the context of being a viable alternative. They can clearly see the value. If they can see the value, if you're a standout on that value, there's going to be no pressure when you do get down there for the presentation to on your fee. There's going to be no pressure around marketing investment from them. So the whole thing's going to make a whole lot of sense. So it is that I look at it and I say, well, these are the things. And of course, when we look at the equation of productivity, prospect, list, reduce or manage expectation, sell. So often I'm saying the one ball you never want to drop is, of course, the listing ball, but the embryo to that is prospecting. You've got to have a constant flow of prospects. So I don't pay lip service in emancipating my activity to saying listing always comes before selling. I actually live it. So when I have a new listing come in, the first thing I'm focused on is who is already watching me. Well, this is what I say with sellers. That's just, everyone gives it a nod at different levels, but few, if any, really pay attention to this. You see, understand once you have a listing, you no longer have to look for sellers, because there's going to be typically more than one watching that listing as it comes up. And as I was saying to the real estate rock stars yesterday, those that I was coaching, you've got to remember that when you're running an open house, what are you making that centric to? What are your thoughts around a welcome home open for inspection? What are your thoughts when you're going down there? Are you thinking in the context of, I hope it's well presented and it works out well with the buyer? Or are you thinking, I hope the sellers in the immediate vicinity are going to turn up today, and then what I do is going to capture their imagination? So in emancipating your activity, it's where you start to understand how this works functionally, and then you manipulate the entire system to your advantage. Take a look at that open for inspection. So I say you don't have to look for your sellers, they're already watching you. So all we have to do is control the message that emanates from that listing once we've identified them. And if that message is conducive to them listing with you, well, then you just lay down misère moving forward. And here's the thing, we worry so much about buyers at the open for inspection, but I say this openly, even if we head into an oversupplied market, even if there are fewer buyers on the ground, the same rings true. Insofar as a property goes, there's always another buyer. The market will always forgive you around the buyers. And in fact, if we, just talking in the context of the welcome home, I've yet to come across a buyer who said, look, I didn't buy that property because I just don't like the way that agent ran the open for inspection around it. Now, as foolhardy as you might be thinking to hear me say that, it makes perfect sense. We spend so much time worrying about it in the context of selling it, yet to the buyer, once they fall for the property, they will buy it despite any number of things that have gone wrong. They won't pay attention necessarily to the advertising of the property, could care less about how the open for inspections were run. They're just thinking in the context of wanting to buy it. So I say there's always another buyer. So there's no need as a real estate rock and roller to be focused upon that aspect of what you're doing in and around your listings when they come up. But I can tell you this, there's rarely a second chance with a seller. So if one of the incumbent sellers, the active property sellers that are researching the market ahead of selling, turn up to your open for inspection and something is done or said that is off-putting to a seller, then you could lose the opportunity to have won their business and not even be conscious of it. My point in case is this, so often I'm sitting with the real estate rock stars and I'll talk about an open home. It's in its first week or first month. And I'll ask how many inspections they had through. And sometimes they'll say 8, or sometimes they'll say 15. Sometimes they'll say, well, it's a madhouse. We had, in excess of 20. And invariably, how I'm thinking, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, well, if there was 14, there were 2 sellers there. They then talk about the sellers and they go, oh, they weren't there. Some of them yesterday were saying, oh no, this is a first home buyer house or property. So most of the people that came were first home buyers. There weren't any sellers there. For goodness sake, if one of the active property sellers that are in the immediate vicinity who, as a first home buyer in that area, bought 6 years ago, what happens if they're there checking that one out to run comparisons between it and their own property before putting it to market? I'm telling you, the numbers don't lie. That's the point I'm trying to make. So if you have 14 couples through in the first week of an open for inspection, 2 of them were selling. If you don't know who they are, you've failed to identify them, it's basically down to what you're doing and saying. So you need to emancipate your activity around making it centric to what's important. So here's the change. Here's something I want you to maybe have a big aha about right now. When I win a listing, my entire focus is leverage to the next listing. How do I make that connection? So my focal point is, don't put a for sale sign on it. Get LA Woman out, which of course is the just listed that has no actual street number on it, no photograph of the property. So to any active property seller that receives this correspondence, they're going to think, well, where is it and how much? And they're going to call me. Then comes out the welcome home invitation. And that welcome home invitation says, if you're researching the market ahead of selling, we'd like you to feel welcome to attend. We'd like you to feel comfortable attending our welcome home. When you're there, don't forget to ask our sales representative for the property seller's research guide. You see, because when I move to the welcome home, it for me is not something that's centric to the buyers. Yes, I want buyers to turn up. Yes, I want the buyer to turn up. Yes, I want to sell the property, but it's not my focal point. My focal point at this point is, how do I leverage from it to the next active property seller? So it is that I say my focus around the welcome home is that it comprises, or it constitutes, what I would refer to as a virtual listing presentation. That when a seller walked in there, it would be conducive to them saying, we really need to put this property on the market with this agency. And I want them to feel comfortable volunteering that information to me, allowing me to identify them as an active property seller. So it is that welcome home invitation says, if you're researching the market ahead of selling, we'd like you to feel welcome to attend our open for inspection. So they come, they volunteer that information. When they get there, we make it clear that we have a property seller's research guide on hand. Even if you don't have it on hand, if you have an electronic version, this is a good reason to garner their email and send that through. Then, of course, we move to follow-up. Now, I've heard loads of cases around this, lots of agents talking about following them up on the same day, but this doesn't make any sense to me because it prohibits the opportunity to identify them as sellers if you haven't already. Because when they come to the open home, the greeting should be relatively simple before the follow-up. As they walk in, and I went through this with a number of real estate rock stars just yesterday, and almost none of them did this. They talked about the pressure associated with people coming in and not being able to talk to them and just wanting to get their names and numbers. That's all well and good. But look, how long does this take? Somebody comes to the door and they say, good afternoon, my name's Mark Dwyer. Your name? Someone says, John Smith. I say, hey, John. I step back whilst nodding my head. If you're listening to this in the car, it's hard to see, but my head is nodding. I say, what are we doing today, folks? Buying or selling? Because for sellers, I have a property seller's research guide, which helps them ascertain the comparative value of their property inside the marketplace today. If you don't have the property seller's research guide, you need to get in touch with us and get it. But of course, even if you don't have that, you could still send them out a comparative market analysis. As I said on many recordings before, price is a subject I like to empower the owner to arrive at, come to their own conclusion of their own opinion, which is subjective, on their own, because I don't want to get into a debate around the value of the property, because it's not my job to calculate the worth. It's my job to create value. And that's what I do as a marketer. So I've had that chance. Now we move to the Tuesday or the Monday, if you prefer. I was always a preference around Monday. I make the call back and it goes something like this. Hi, John. Sorry to bother you. My name's Mark. We met at the open for inspection of the weekend at number 2, Lincoln Court. Now, I won't ask you about this one, because if you liked it, you would have told us. And in any event, you'll let us know if you do. Is that right? Yeah. Now, my understanding is you were selling, weren't you? In both instances, there are 2 assumptions. Now, I want to show you the power of an assumption and how it works. You see, I know that Australians and New Zealanders, for that matter, do not respond well to interrogation. However, we do very much like correcting naive dummies. You see, if you run an assumption, that is relatively vague, they will more than happily correct you. Yet if you try interrogation, do you have to sell before you buy? Is your property on the market? How much money have you got in the bank? Are you able to buy this property today? People just resist that. But if you run an assumption, they're only too happy to correct you. Now look at this in context. Your competition's ringing people up saying, you attended an open for inspection. They can hardly remember it. Then they're saying, well, just wanted to get your thoughts or how you feel about it. How they feel about it, they have shown no sign of liking it whatsoever. You honestly think by some bizarre miracle, they're going to say, oh, I've just had this epiphany. That's the property that I need to buy. Wake up to yourself, guys. And in any event, you are going to contrast against all the other agents by not badgering them to remember or give you an idea on price, or to the point where some agents say, if you did like it, what do you think you might pay? Which is just absolute insanity. To stay away from that, you've contrasted. Now, if by some strange chance they did like it and they did want to buy it, you doing the reverse and saying, look, if you liked it, you would let us know, they will correct you. They'll say, well, matter of fact, we are interested in it. Bang. You've still got the right answer, but nobody's getting hurt because it's not around interrogation. And then, of course, if they're comfortable that, no, we didn't like it, they're let off the hook, you move straight into the next assumption. Now, you guys were selling, weren't you? They're not sure whether they told you or not. But even if they say no, what gave you that idea? You can bail out. No one gets hurt. I'm sorry, I'll just adjust my records. So it's important that you understand contextually what's important. If you're going to be a real estate rock and roller, you have to understand that every time you get a listing, you've got to be in 1 or 2 modes. That is to replace it in momentum or to build market share inside attraction. If you don't have a 30% market share, then you've got to be obligated within your own rights to actually figure out how to leverage and move through traction phase and build market share. And in any event, I say that you want to create a surplus of opportunities, because if you get to a surplus of opportunities, you're in the luxurious position of being able to, if you choose, to knock business back that you don't want. If they've got a rigid discount mentality, you need 10 listings, you've got 15 on the board. Well, if this is one of the ones that you might be waving bye-bye to, you are going to feel emancipated around your activity, because you want business, but you don't need it, because you've understood how to get yourself into an abundance mentality. So it's so important that you understand the priorities around this. So finally, not finally, because this subject I can go on with forever. The next part of it I wanted to talk about in the context is just understanding what you need to make things work. Do you need an assistant, or do you need assistants? So an assistant is assist, ANTS, assist ant, Or do you need assistance, ANCE? Well, in my opinion, you need assistance. You see, the problem with just getting a direct assistant, although many of you do have this in play, and I'm okay with that, but you've also got the advantage of me, who's got great experience in managing people, helping you to coordinate that relationship and make it work. Understand this, the moment you move into having an assistant, you've now moved yourself into a space of management. And if you're struggling to manage yourself, then you're going to struggle even more to manage someone else. So most of the stuff that you give to them in trying to emancipate your activity, you are, in fact, just sidelining them into what I refer to as PTBB tasks, pretending to be busy. So it is that you need to understand that functional language that allows you to communicate where you're at every stage. We use this all the way through everything that we do here at Sales Trainer, Real Estate Rockstar, Property Careers, and Corporate Manager. Red tasks, those tasks that are basically administrative. Now, a large proportion of those should be shipped off to assistants or an assistant. Now, by virtue of the fact that you're going to need assistants, you know, if you've got somebody who's good at prospecting, to my mind, they would be classified as blue, or as some people say, light blue. They're not going to be good at the red. In fact, they're probably going to be suffering the same affliction that you are. Now, I understand that there are tasks that are necessary, but not income producing. And we have to underpin these with definable process and support. So you need to utilize the assistance that might be available inside the agency. So many people just don't understand this, but start to look at each task you're performing and ask, is this a red task? Is it necessary but not income producing? If it's unnecessary and non-income producing, just eliminate it. Don't do it at all. Yeah. Blue tasks, those sales and marketing tasks, direct income producing, skill, knowledge, expertise, performance are required here. This is essentially, or basically, I should say, when you are belly to belly, eyeball to eyeball with someone who is guilty of looking to sell real estate in the first instance or purchase real estate in the second. These are the only times you are truly working in the blue. And to me, these are necessary or essential income producing tasks. And what you're doing now is a black task. This is training, planning, development. Those of you that are spending time online with me each week in the RocknRolla, where we're setting up your tasks for the week, these are black tasks. What you're doing right now is training to save time later on. So this is progressive realization of income growth and prosperous longevity, where you are working towards improving progressively your professional capacity. And part of improving that is developing a language and understanding where it sits. Now, the final one is green tasks. These are those which can be outsourced because they are more efficient outsourced and at the same time more economical. And there are loads of these that you should not be engaged in at all. I mean, I was talking to a real estate rockstar the other day who said they pay, they struggle with writing ads. However, their clients love the ads that they produce, and for that reason they want to do them. I said, you need to find someone that can write the ads for you, because the cost per ad and the speed with which they do them is going to outpace you every time. So it makes more sense for you to be engaged in talking or liaising or running listing presentations or something in the blue, while someone over here in the green is doing something for you at a more economical rate. Just need to understand that language. We need to embellish that language. We need to build that language into a functional understanding of where we're at on an almost daily basis. As you do this, you are then emancipating your activity, because what you ought to be focused on is a complete change. If I look at normally, even at the elite level, which most of you are, this is an area where perhaps your blue is maybe approaching around 20%. If you're a superstar, maybe 30%. And your red task would probably comprise the rest. And you look into black stuff, rarely if ever, probably haven't considered looking at outsourcing or green tasks, mainly because of the financial commitment that you fear. You think, oh, it's going to cost money, so I'll do it and it's cheaper. Well, it's actually not. If you look at it on the overall capacity, there is a lost productivity cost, an opportunity cost that you're maybe not taking into consideration if you were doing more in another area and fulfilling your true capacity in areas that you not only enjoy, but you relish because you have taken the time to figure that out. So it is that I say openly that you need to take a good look, get the language in place to begin with, then start to understand the things that you need to eliminate out. And the balance, we want to change that. We want to progressively move to somewhere around 40 or 50% of our time is spent in the blue. A good solid 10 to as much as 20% is spent in the black, and the remainder is spent in the red. And you introduce some other things that are green to complement that, to stimulate that behavior in and around emancipating your activity. Now that you're starting to understand how you function at an optimum level, how you derive complete satisfaction in your chosen career, and how you balance it out into a career lifestyle, the envy of many others. It's rock and roll, guys. So you want to be a real estate rock and roller, this is how you do it. My name's Mark Dwyer. You can contact me, Mark with a K, at realestaterockstar.com.au, or you can telephone me at +61 410 592 165. Rock and real estate, guys. We'll see you again on the next session of Real Estate Rock and Roller.